Hey, this is Jerry Logan again, professor of sociology. We're going to be talking about um, class 1120, sex, gender, and power, sociology. So, what I wanted to bring up is some of the contents for the exam, for the second exam, which is available today. So, part of the exam, and then let me see. So, we look at the exam. So, we click on here, we go to exam two. Click on exam two right here, and they give you access to the exam. So remember, the exam is going to be 40 questions, 2.5 points per question. I have a time limit about 2.5 hours. Chapter 6, 9, 10, and 11. Again, to make sure you read each question very carefully and to make sure you answer all the questions. The test has a 3 hour time limit. Excuse me, it's a 3 hour time limit. Forgive me. So about 3 hours. Make sure you try to complete the exam in one setting, or just say, well, let me go do this, go play PS4, go play, NBA games or Call of Duty, and then say, I'm gonna come back to it. So make sure you complete it all in one setting for this exam right here. So pay attention also to the deadline. So we click on begin for the exam, which again is more of the instructions, and then you just kind of scroll down and answer some of the questions. Pay attention to each question. Just say, for instance, this one right here. This theory argues that women-specific locations in patriarchal societies use their resource in the construction of new technology. So my advice would be, okay, these are the different theories. Let me rule out the ones that we didn't talk about, and then let me focus on the two theories that we did talk about. Again, the same thing we're here is the ideology that a belief system supporting dominant social institutions define women as responsible for the moral everyday affairs of the home. So this ideology, so you have to just kind of comb through these again and see which one of these you rule out the wrong answers. And again, as you see at the bottom, you have the PowerPoint presentations ready and available to look up. But I always say to make sure you kind of definitely go through the PowerPoints and know where things are at. So as we scroll down, the Title IX of the Educational Amendments, 1972, is a federal law prohibiting sex discrimination in federally funded education programs and activities. This law has been critical to establish equal education opportunity for women, not just in schools, but also state-sponsored activities. So true and false. So these are some of the things that I just want you to pay attention. These are actual exam questions out of the 40 questions right here. Once you finish, you put save, all answers, save and submit, and then that way you can go ahead and complete the exam. So the next thing is what I would recommend also for the exam is to go back over the discussion questions. So let's just say, for instance, the exam starts with chapter 6. I would leave it. So I'm not taking the exam, I already passed it. So we go to chapter 6. If you go to chapter 6, there's a video which talks about this particular chapter. Also, there are weekly discussion questions. So in the video, I did talk about some of the main things of the chapter itself. It's a 50-minute video. I know you're like, man, that's a long video. However, I'm long-winded, of course. So therefore, just kind of look at that as an example, as a way to kind of, help narrate through the video. Also, we have the weekly discussion chapters 6 discussion questions. So some of these, if you look at these, like the first questions are just scenarios, which is not going to be on the exam. But the second question, things like the cult of domesticity and 2022, so that's going to be on the exam. Current social expectations for the family, Philip Arian. Some of these questions, Jesse Bernard. So some of these things will be like on the exam. So I just want you to kind of review. That's why I have y'all doing the discussion questions, so you all know and be familiar with some of the questions that talk about the main points. And y'all been doing a great job of answering the discussion questions, so make sure you continue to do that. And then just say we're going over to chapter 9 and 10. Going over chapter 9 and 10, again, download the PowerPoint presentation. Make sure you have it available. Also, being familiar with the weekly discussion questions on women, crime, and violence. I'm going to ask about differences between crime and deviant behavior. I'm actually about Cesar Lombroso, Thomas out of all those individuals. So I want to know who, make sure you're familiar with each individuals as well. Labeling theory, being familiar with labeling theory. Uh, these are some of the criminologist's explanation regarding crime and gender social roles. Make sure you're familiar with that. Power women in prison as well. So these are kind of just some of the discussion questions that help prepare you for the exam and get more familiar with the chapter. The next chapter, education and science. You can look over these as well, download the PowerPoint presentation, have it available for the exam. Also, some of these questions about the self-fulfilling prophecy, be prepared for that on the exam. Academic achievement and gender gap, gender in the curriculum, gender gap in higher education, of course Title IX as you've seen in the video about Title IX, and then you have to be familiar with the feminist theory and feminist epistemology. So that's why you have the discussion questions so that you get familiar, which helps you answer the questions for the exam. I did notice on this thing that my videos were not uploaded. So when you try to watch these things, it won't upload a video. And I was like, oh shoot. So I actually ran out of space on here and I didn't want to delete anything. So a lot of these videos, like for chapter 9, chapter 10 and 11, chapter 9, 10, and 11 I put on my YouTube channel, which is Jerry Logan Professor. So make sure you're familiar with that as well, so you can kind of pick up some of the videos that I have on this, because I tried to upload it. As you see, it won't even let me upload them at all, and I don't want to just go back and delete things as well. So going back to the discussion questions, also looking at chapter 11, downloading the PowerPoint presentation, having that available. Also looking at some of the questions of men's power, define and explain men's power. Don't get it confused, be familiar with it. The social movements, how it transformed the status quo, your opinion of the feminist perspective, and the state, which is some of the key points of the chapter. So these are just different things that I would recommend just making sure you're prepared for, because it's an exam which you are able to do from home. It just make sure you relax and comfortable. And like right here, I have all the PowerPoint presentations that are open, ready for me to be able to review. So feel free, like I said, go on my YouTube channel, look it up on my YouTube channel, Jerry Logan Professor, to catch the videos, to help kind of go over it a little bit more. Also, if you open up this one right here, hopefully it opens up and you all can see this. Then this is the one on chapter 11, having this one available, looking at some of the key points of chapter 11. I have a slow computer, but looking at some of the key points of chapter 11, open this up, and kind of reviewing this a little bit, even though, let me see the other chapters. Let's go into the first one. So you go to chapter 6, it say gender and families, just kind of scrolling down, you're looking at some of the key terminologies. I know it's a lot of different slides, and it actually is 53 slides. And I know for an exam, it's like, okay, I gotta find this, but the biggest thing is just trying to be able to locate some of the key points of the chapter. So I know it can be very time consuming, but don't worry about the time. The time does continue. But look at stuff like I have a bold cult of domesticity. So the easiest thing to do is when you see, instead of just trying to memorize word for each slide, but just be familiar with each chapter it's talking about. So this particular chapter saying, okay, this is about, gender and families. And so when a question comes up with gender and families, just kind of look towards these and just say, hey, I'm gonna find these right here. Go through some of these slides. So, structural diversity theory, make sure you're familiar with some of these theories as well. So try not to become overwhelmed by it. Just try to relax and just kind of go through the slides and making sure that here's Jesse Bernard, what you talked about before. So a lot of this stuff is just, knowing the main points of it and just kind of following along with it. Here's the word diversity, which was in the discussion question, But this is stuff that when you do the discussion questions, you're becoming more familiar with the chapter, and it's making it easier for you all to just try to navigate through this thing, the family, household, non-family household things, just particular things that stands out. So that's why I want to kind of just, I don't want to just say, well, know this, know this, know this. I want you to know the whole particular chapter because all of it is important. It's, as I lecture and talk about it, it's all very important, but for the exam purposes, I'm pulling out just, we're going over 4 chapters, pretty much maybe 15 questions in each chapter. The last one is chapter 11 is a shorter chapter, so it's probably like 15 questions of each chapter, which would be 45 for 3 chapters and then maybe 5. So you're looking at what are the top things, but being able to see the exam, you're able to just go to these PowerPoint slides and be able to just kind of pick them out and say, okay, well, here's some of the some top things of each particular chapter, which makes it a little bit easier for you, be familiar with the true and false, so making sure you don't get caught up with the true and false part of it. So it's an exam. You have time, like I said, do it all in one sitting. Don't get up, start the exam, pause it, go play Call of Duty, and then come on back. Make sure you complete the exam. Make sure you have, as I have the all PowerPoint presentations available, so I just at the bottom up here, be able to open them up and say, okay, have the exam going on at the same time. Answer the, best answer on there. So pretty much just, it's more of a time consuming thing, but you should be familiar with the topics. Gender, education, and science. So when they start talking about education, okay, you're like, man, that's 80 slides. Okay, how many, but then some of these slides have some of the key points. So what I do is recommend students as you go through this and maybe put a system in place is highlighting certain things and say, okay, well, you know what, some of the stuff is kind of important, so let me just try to highlight it. So just say, this is maybe right here, this is, I don't know how to highlight it, but kind of highlight it in somehow type of way. Here you go. Let's see if I can do it in yellow. Oh, I can't see it now, but just try to highlight certain points of how you want the, for you to be able to see it, That's too light, but anyway. Yeah, so you better just kind of go through this and highlight some of the things. I don't know, you all have a way of doing it, so I'm still learning this stuff, but at the same time, you're able to highlight it and say, okay, just say here. There we go. So you highlight certain things as you read through it and say, okay, this looks like an exam question, which makes it easier. And it's been difficult for me to just highlight what's going to be on the exam because then you're kind of focusing on only the highlighted things. And I want you to learn the whole particular chapter. So I don't want to say for an exam review, I'm going to highlight what you need to know. In that sense, it pulls you away from you just looking for certain things. Well, let me just pull the slides that's only got highlighted and ignore the rest. I want you to be able to go through it and try to study it. So that's something I would recommend when you see, certain things and say, okay, well, let me highlight it, and then it makes sense that it may be on the exam. So when you mention something like this and say, okay, well, I know that's going to be on the exam, so let me go ahead and highlight this one. Bam, stuff like this. So when I come through the exam, I can just really, when I take the exam, I can just kind of highlight certain things, which would be good. I don't know, some of y'all are very good with technology, but that's what I would recommend for students to do is to highlight certain things and say, okay, but as you go through there and just, because usually just same thing with your book. If you had your book, you would highlight the book and say, okay, hey, this is something important. So you highlight certain things, but I would say continue to do with the PowerPoint presentations as well. So just kind of go through these things and highlight what you think, hidden bias, certain things, certain definitions that's, I put in bold letters so that you'll be familiar with it. And, and just kind of, you got to spend time with this. So when you see the term self-fulfilling prophecy, and you be like, okay, let me highlight this one. Cool, the self-fulfilling prophecy. So now I'll be able to just, as I go through, I'll be able to find it. But this is still, even though it's a take-home class, but it's still the opportunity for you to be able to take notes. So I've seen students, they created, they took certain PowerPoints and they combined them into a new type of, I want to say document, but they put some of the top things together and put them all on one. Like I said, 80 slides, they probably put the top 20 slides on there and just organize them in such a way that they're able to be able to find it easier. So it just takes time for you to be at home, what works for you, and I don't want to recommend things to you that may not be comfortable for you, but at the same time, being a student, finding things that works easier for you. So a lot of times, just when I used to highlight stuff in school, I would just highlight, put like a little um, highlighter stick thing, whatever you call it, on certain pages of the book, and it just helped me to be able to say, okay, go to this one, go to this one. But sometimes it's hard when you can't, take an exam with your book available. And this one, you do have your PowerPoint presentations available. So I would recommend for each this exam, the final exam, all your exams, find a system that works for you. And you should have boldly put in bold letters some of the definitions that stand out so you can be able to really see it. But you do have to spend time and say, okay, let me highlight certain slides which kind of stands out, because I'm figuring it's going to ask about 15 questions, 17 questions per slide or something like that, and let me just get familiar based upon the discussion questions. Yeah, this look like an exam question. So really it's just basically organization and then time consuming part of it, and then just getting yourself organized. And that's one of the biggest things that you have to do, is say doing time consuming, getting organized for online class, and so you're able to be able to find out exactly where everything is. So you may have to spend some time and say, okay, let me read over this again. Let me read this chapter's PowerPoint. So it's actually you're reading the book, but it's just in a PowerPoint setting. So I would say read it. Just like a book, you have to, for class, you have to read the book. You take the lectures, you take PowerPoints. I have the videos as well, which shows all this stuff. So just kind of just going through this, reading this, and say, okay, let me highlight certain things. For those who don't, who need a strategy, or who would this strategy may benefit you, highlight certain things in here, and then that way you're familiar with it. But you do have to read it, maybe read it twice. A lot of my chapters, I was in college, I had to highlight it, I read it again, and I read it again to make sure that I had a full understanding of it. So something like this. Okay, this is an exam question, so let me do this. Again, highlight stuff. Some students print it out, and then they just have it next to them. If you don't print it out, then you highlight it. And then some students where you write notes next to it. So you have to put a system in place that works for you through your way of school. So some people print it out, they get a yellow highlighter and just, go through their slides. But the biggest thing is everything that's on the slides, everything on the exam is from the slides. So there's nothing you have to search outside of this to get the answer. So everything is in there. So be familiar with each slide for this exam, the next exam, get yourself organized. The questions are there in front of you. You're able to go review your notes, but it's easier if you know where stuff is, and that's the biggest part that I don't want students to have a problem with. Say, hold on, we gotta look and see. You do have to sit down and you have to read this stuff. If you don't really have access to the computer to try to read it, some people may have their cell phone, then you can watch my video. I talk about it. I try to explain as much as I can about it without being long-winded, because I've been criticized for being not criticized, but they say, oh, you long-winded, you do a lot of talking. Yes, so you see this. Of course, this is on the exam. We just saw this earlier. I like stuff like this. When you see it, just highlight stuff like this. Say, man, this looked like an exam question. But study it. Just as you highlight it, just say, okay, I highlighted. Then later on, the next day, I'm going to study it prior to the exam. And then you say, now I know what it is. So you have to still put some time in. A lot of people, I say, put in a couple hours, 5, 10, 15 hours a week studying. Like I told you in the beginning, going to school is like a full-time job. You can't just glance at this for the first time and take the exam. Some people may be successful with it. However, at the same time, I don't recommend it. I recommend, that's why I have to send out the discussion questions, because now the discussion questions are making you more familiar with it. So therefore I know I can grade the discussion questions based on your participation, saying, okay, you know this chapter now. You have a better feeling. Even though you've done the discussion questions, you do have an exam coming up. So now let me study and highlight the top things of this that we discussed in the discussion questions, but I'm also going to highlight some of the things that I believe will be on the exam. So whether you have it printed out as you take an exam, you might have stuff like this. Print this out. Print certain slides out. So your top slides with all the definitions, have them available next to you where you're able to say, okay, that's right there. So some people are easy to navigate through the computer. Some people may be easy for them to print it out, put it next to them. So some of these are some of the tips that I have. So any other tips that you all have that you need, just let me know. You have to email me and say, hey, I need a little help with this. I need to, get better organized. Here's feminist standpoint theory. This is on the exam. This is one of the possible exam questions. Again, print this out, or again, just highlight it, and then you say, okay, this looks like an exam question. I know you're gonna ask about that. He asks about it in the discussion questions. Use the discussion questions as a tool and a guide that will help prepare you for the exam. And then once you get to the PowerPoint presentations, highlight, print it out, whatever you do, make sure you review it and study it so when you see it, a discussion question, you ask about feminist standpoint theory, try to avoid, okay, let me go run around and see what it is. Study it, try to get to know what it is. It makes it easier for you. So not just in my class, but all the classes, make sure that you just get yourself prepared and not this stuff be foreign and new to you on the first time that you see this, So just giving you different tips. There's a lot of slides. I try to place all the information from the book as much as I can, put it in the PowerPoint presentation. You are able to have the PowerPoint presentations available and your notes available as you take this exam, which is at home, and you have enough time just to go ahead and complete it. Do it in one setting, no distractions, something that you feel comfortable with, so that you're able to pass this exam and do well. Very proud of all the work that y'all have been doing, continue to do so. However, at the same time, this semester's still not over. Do not get lax, relax. Don't start like, okay, it's warm outside again, let me go out. Take your time and make sure you get this correctly. Anytime again, send me an email. If you want to meet through a Zoom meeting, you got questions, feel free to contact me. That is what I'm here for, to be able to help you understand, help you able to pass this course, help you be successful, period. So that's all I have. Make sure you complete the exam. For any questions, again, and I said it 100 million times, let me know. All right, good luck on the exam. Have a great one.